This is a full disclosure special report. Law enforcement officers who went to Washington to testify against the currently proposed immigration bill known as Senate Bill 744 were humiliated, threatened with arrest, and generally abused by the senators and their staffs.
We looked at the bill and saw glaring problems in the bill. We in law enforcement attempted to influence some of the senators and their staff about these problems within the bill, and I have to say that we weren't treated very well, and we weren't treated very well by either the Democrats or the Republicans, which was rather shocking to me. It seemed to me that they had the idea that we know what we know, and our opinions formed, and we don't want to hear anything else. And so when you point out glaring flaws in the bill, they choose to ignore it.
He and his fellow officers traveled back to our nation's capital on their own dime. They wanted to explain to the so-called Gang of Eight problems in the currently proposed legislation that would negatively impact law enforcement across the country. We asked Richard to explain what he meant when he said they weren't treated very well.
When I say that we weren't greeted very well, first of all, in my experience of speaking to congressmen or in the state or federal government, usually get treated very well as a law enforcement officer. They send somebody to greet you. They usually take you on a tour of the offices in the congressional buildings or that type of thing. That's not what the kind of reception we got. We got to Washington, D.C., and when we were going into the offices of the Senate to make our presentations, when we got up to the doors, there was a screening process much like you see in the airport. There were officers there, sheriffs, who had come in full uniform. As part of their uniform, they wear a duty belt and a gun. They were stripped of their weapons. They had to stow their weapons, and we were searched. What did they have to be afraid of from law enforcement whose duty it is to protect lives? I don't know, but they then took us through the whole process of coming into the building.
These veteran officers who traveled to D.C. solely for the purpose of giving the senators the benefit of their years of professional experience were subjected to the TSA treatment. After that humiliation, were they met by some senator's aide and given a proper escort to the hearing room? No.
We found our way to the hearing room. We go to the hearing room, and then they spring the news on us that we were not allowed to use this electronic equipment that we brought, for instance, our computers, our PowerPoint presentations, and that type of thing, that we were supposed to speak just basically, from memory. Then the audience was supposed to be made up of these senators and their aides and staff from Congress and the Senate. And what unknown to us at the time was that someone had called in a bomb scare, which I guess is pretty common in Washington. Anyway, the bomb scare was specifically in the Senate side, and so we had a sparse audience because most of the Senate and their staff were involved in the evacuation for the bomb scare, so we had very few people to speak to.
Isn't it curious that the supposed bomb scare happened just at the time these peace officers were to testify? Curious. Although some of their group had to leave to go back to work, some of them were able to stay and return the next day and sit in the audience of the hearing room. One of the officers, a highly experienced officer from Immigration and Customs, made the mistake of trying to give input during the hearing.
And we were finally sat in front of the senators who were going to, talk about the bill. Chris Crane raised his hand politely and asked if he could ask a question from law enforcement. And it was like, I went to the Sheriff's Academy, I went to the Military Police Academy, and I've been through basic training. And it was like asking a dumb question at in the military when all the DIs just swarm in on you and start yelling at you. That's kind of what happened to Chris. The staff just surrounded him. They were yelling at him. Chris, to his credit, remained calm during the whole thing. They actually asked him to leave the room. They escorted him out of the room, and someone called the police. We never figured out exactly what Chris had done to violate whatever rules he was supposed to have violated. In fact, the police officer also was shocked and couldn't understand why the police were called. But obviously, the group did not want to hear the truth from law enforcement who are experienced in these matters. And I think the bomb scare and the way Chris was treated when he tried to ask a question were all just symptoms of the fact that they didn't want to hear about it.
Their minds were already made up. The decision to go forward on the bill had already been made, no matter how reckless and damaging it will be. Another curious incident occurred when the well-known Arizona sheriff was scheduled to present his comments.
One point in this talk to the congressional and Senate people, Sheriff Balboa from Pima County, Arizona, was scheduled to speak. Just before he got up to speak, he received a phone call. One of his aides said, "McCain is calling." So McCain, that's the senator from Arizona, I presume, and he being a sheriff of Arizona, county in Arizona, he took the phone call. He's standing there, and we watch him react to the phone call. He had a shocked look in his face. The color left his face. When he hung up the phone, he packed up his briefcase and left the room. So he didn't speak. He was scheduled to do these radio interviews. He didn't do the radio interviews, and we saw very little of him after that. Now, I'm a detective, and the evidence shows me that McCain threatened him. And so when we talk about where the political power is coming from, it's not just the liberal democratic political machine that's pushing buttons. The Republican Party is pushing buttons too.
So it isn't Republicans versus Democrats, or even liberal versus conservative. Somewhere high above the public eye, someone has made the decision that people who are currently in this country illegally must be made citizens, and our elected officials are working in lockstep to make it happen. We ask Richard, what can we do about this?
Well, you're doing what we need to do, and that is, first of all, draw this dirty laundry out in the air, the open air, so the public can see that they're being lied to. They're being lied to by the people that have sworn an oath to represent them and to keep our Constitution and our laws. They openly wink at violations of the laws and politically created a class of criminals that are protected, and that would be illegal aliens.
A class of protected criminals, a new term for people who will be rewarded with citizenship for violating our immigration laws if this bill becomes law. The only way to stop it is to become more assertive in our communications with our federal legislators.
We're calling for revolution. Vocal revolution, that we tell them we've had enough, we're not going to take it anymore, and you need to do something or you're going to lose your job.
We'd like to know what you, the viewers, think. Please respond to our survey and leave your comments below. Number 1, do you think our Congress should make illegal immigrants a protected class to avoid prosecution? Yes or no? Number 2, do you think the reason Congress wants to make illegal immigrants a protected class is because there are so many violators currently in this country that law enforcement cannot possibly prosecute them? Yes or no? And number 3, do you think the reason the senators did not want to hear from law enforcement was because they hope that you will never know the consequences of what they are proposing? Yes or no? Please be sure to leave your comments below. I'm Leslie Dutton. Thank you.